front of him in the recruiting thing was a guy called Jean de Rocher, and the two of them had played together last season in North America at Johnstown. We'd looked at both, and we made the move on Jean de Rocher. We talked to his agent, he was keen to come, etc., etc. We made the contract offer, he accepted it, it was all signed, the work permit was done, the flights were booked, but John changed his mind at the last minute, which was extremely disappointing, and we were actually pretty angry about it, if the truth be told. Tony was not a happy bunny, and I wasn't happy either, because we'd worked very, very hard over a 2-day period to get everything in place to get Jean into the UK. As it happens, then he decided to stay in North America, and that elevated Joe back onto the radar screen, and we did a bit more background work on him, and we were just in the throes of making him an offer when Jean de Rocher called me at home one night. He'd already been through that "I'm sorry, I'm not coming" email business with both Tony and myself, but he actually called me at home on the day that we'd been doing a lot more work on Joe, and he'd heard that, you know, we were doing that work, and he said to us, he said to me personally, and he said it in an email to Tony as well, that we would not be disappointed should we sign Joe Tolari. He more or less guaranteed that Joe would put up good numbers, and that Joe would work his socks off, and that Joe would be a great member of the locker room. And very rarely do you get players lie about one another, because what goes around comes around. And it was an absolutely superb endorsement of Joe Tolari by the guy that we looked to sign ahead of him. So I relayed that onto Tony, and that kind of made Tony more determined that we'd give Joe Tolari a go. And I think everyone in Manchester is now delighted that Jean de Rocher decided not to come. Having said that, you know, he did look a good player, but I think, you know, how things happen, you know, one minute you're disappointed, the next minute, you know, Joe Tolari arrives with a good reputation and good references, and he's lived up to every single one of them, you know, and some.
You're talking there about players recommending other players, and of course we mentioned earlier when KC left, Luke Stoffaker came in. He played previously with Sean Stark, one of our other new signings this season. How instrumental was Sean in getting Luke's signature? Well,
what had happened was when Tony talked to the chief about possibly, you know, having to release him and whatnot, he'd already had a word with one or two of the other guys in the room to say, look, you know, quietly, you know, do we know of anybody out there, blah blah blah. And Sean came back and recommended Luke. So we did the background work on Luke, and you know, one of the things that stood out immediately was that whilst he wasn't a big guy, he was someone who was prepared to stand up for himself, as his record in the United Hockey League showed last year. He was leading goal scorer on his team, and he led the league in fighting majors. You know, for someone who's like 4'7" and 6 stone wet through, that kind of makes an impression on you. And Luke's come in, and Luke's done as good a job as we could have expected to, because he was coming into a new team. The only person he knew was Sean. He settled in very, very quickly, and he's done a job for us. So yeah, it is strange how things go about, but you know, you have to take the word. Or you don't have to take the word, but it's advisable to take the word of players if they're recommending someone. You know, if they recommend someone who's a dummy, you know, it only makes them look stupid. And you know, not too often will players give bad references on guys, because particularly if they're trying to bring them to their own team, they're not going to do it. It wouldn't make any sense.
Next step for the Manchester Phoenix is, of course, the playoffs. How confident are we that we can get through to the Final Four?
Well, the big thing is that we've got to get through the final league games and get through them healthy, so that when we do take on the Sheffield Steelers, that we go in with a full strength squad, and a squad that's as fit and as rested as possible. The big thing at this stage of the season, Richard, is that, you know, there is a little bit of fatigue in the room, and you know, the supporters need to appreciate that these guys have been on the ice 3-4 times a week now, 2 games a week, sometimes 3 games a week, since the beginning of September. And you know, you could say, well, yeah, but they get Monday and Tuesday off, and they go and play golf and they relax. They do, but you know, that is a tough game to play out there on the ice. As anyone who's just skated will know, you know, never mind carrying around all that equipment and getting banged and hacked and cross-checked and elbowed and everything else that goes on out there. That is one tough game to play. And there is a little bit of fatigue in the room, and there's 1 or 2 guys who are carrying knocks that we've not made any song and dance about at all. As, club policy is not to give out any full detail of guys' injuries, but there are one or two players who are carrying a few knocks, and the key now, after tonight's game against Edinburgh, which is an important game, it's our last home game, so we want to go out in style at home for our own supporters, obviously, who've been fantastic all year. But we want to get through the 2 remaining games away to Nottingham and away to Hull, and then build towards those important games against Sheffield on the Friday night in Sheffield and at home on the Sunday. And I guess probably the easiest way of putting the way we'll approach it is we're going to approach it in European football's fashion. We're away in the first leg. The idea is going to go there, contain them, quieten their crowd, hit them on the counter-attack and see what we can come out of Sheffield with. If we come out of there with, even if we were to go there and lose, if we can come out there with less than a 2-goal spread, then we've got a great chance at home on the Sunday. Anything less or anything better than that, in terms of a result on the Friday night in Sheffield, then that is going to boost confidence enormously coming into the home game here on the Sunday. And for the team to be 7th, playing the team that's finishing 2nd, and for us to have the home ice advantage, that is an advantage that we have got to make the most of. We've got to play a really smart road game in Sheffield on the Friday night, quieten them down, stay with them, hopefully, nick something while we're there, and then come home here on the smaller ice surface that suits us. It's not so much fun for them. Their team is built for speed on bigger ice. Our team is bigger and built for the smaller ice surface here in Altrincham, and we've got to make those circumstances work in our advantage in Game 2 on the Sunday night.
Andy Costigan, thank you very much.
My pleasure.